forcing farmers to chip in anymore. That would allow producers, those who are on the ground and know what their businesses need, they can decide how to spend the money instead of being required to fill out forms for a whole week only to be declined because they didn't fill out the right form. That would be a good, concrete way of helping. I'm sorry, but your time is up. So we need to proceed to statements by members. The Honourable Member for Vaudreuil-Soulan.
Madam Speaker, today I rise to honor the life of Sharon Bronstein. Sharon was best known for being a pioneer in Canada's beauty industry, bringing an unprecedented level of commitment and passion to her craft. For decades, she was focused on one thing: lifting, empowering, and supporting the women around her. But that wasn't her only legacy, Madam Speaker. Throughout her life, Sharon wanted to help build a better community around her in any way she could. And whether it was organizing large beauty bashes, benefiting Hope and Cope, volunteering with B'nai B'rith, and organizing countless private events for underprivileged, sick, and children, she lived her life with purpose and kindness. Among the hundreds of messages that poured out following her passing, perhaps this one summed up her most important attribute. Anytime I was in her presence, I felt her warmth and kindness. Sharon truly made everyone feel special. Madam Speaker, I offer condolences to her children, Tracy and David, to her grandchildren, Joshua, Jason, Alexandra, and Jacqueline, and to all of her family and friends. She was an incredible person who will be missed by so many. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Souris Moose Mountain.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to pay tribute to Mr. Rodney Bowl of Fillmore, Saskatchewan, who unexpectedly passed away on January 28th. Rod left an incredible legacy in his experiences as a world-class trap shooter. He represented Canada in the men's double trap event at the 1996 Summer Olympic Games in Atlanta, one of the biggest achievements in his sporting career. Rod represented Canada at the Pan American Games in 1995 and 2003. He captured 4 international, 23 Canadian national, and 47 Saskatchewan trap shooting titles, with the most recent national championship in 2019. Rod competed in trap shooting competitions across the globe and is also an inductee in the Saskatchewan Sport Hall of Fame. Rod was a proud farmer, community advocate, RM counselor, and he loved the small town lifestyle of Fillmore, Saskatchewan. To his wife, Terry, his sons, Sean and Cal, and the rest of the Bowl family, I extend my sincere condolences on your loss. Rest assured that Rod and his legacy will never be forgotten.
The Honourable Member for Madawaska-Restigouche. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Today, I feel privileged to speak of someone very dear to me in my writing. Over the years, she has inspired in those she loves a sense of curiosity and fearlessness in exploring life. She's one of those for whom all of humanity feels eternal gratitude for all their love and attention. You may have guessed, Madam Speaker, that I am, of course, speaking of my mother, Pierrette. Today is the 19th of February. It's her birthday. So, I'd like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to her and all the mothers in the world, and to thank her for the endless unconditional love that she has given her children. Mom, from your great-grandchildren, your grandchildren, our sister who is looking down from heaven, my brothers and me, we love you. Happy birthday. Happy 83rd birthday.
The Honourable Member for Churchill, Kiwanuke, ASCII.
Madam Speaker, Cross Lake here in northern Manitoba is facing its third wave of COVID-19. 204 active cases and counting. Elders, children, essential workers, including water truck drivers, are sick, and self-isolation spaces are full. The community is scared and exhausted. Yesterday, 9 flights left the community, taking people to safety. As overall numbers go down in Manitoba, the same is not happening for First Nations like Cross Lake. This has everything to do with a history of federal neglect. Cross Lake is a community of over 8,000 people. It has an acute housing crisis. One of the households affected by COVID has over 20 people living in there. And 5 years ago, the federal government promised Cross Lake a hospital. The community is still waiting. At this time, the federal government must pull out all the stops for Cross Lake. They need a full military response, including medical response. They need emergency infrastructure. But beyond this, Cross Lake needs an end to federal neglect. This is about saving lives.
The Honourable Member for Charlottetown.
Madam Speaker, here in Canada's smallest and nicest province, we have a vibrant Black community supported by the Black Cultural Society of Prince Edward Island. The organization has taken some major steps forward in recent months. Its first ever executive director, Tamara Steele, was recently named one of 33 Black Canadians making change now by Chatelaine magazine. And it's not hard to see why. Under her leadership, the Black Cultural Society of PEI launched a camp for female-identifying youth of color to be and grow together, petitioned the PEI legislature for a racially focused review of provincial legislation, and co-organized a huge Black Lives Matter march. They recently launched a Black business directory, including caterers, photographers, dance instructors, clothing designers, all contributing to the island's culture and economy. Thank you, Tamara, and the Black Cultural Society of PEI for your hard work preserving the island's Black history, promoting racial equity, and creating programs and partnerships to further the success of the Black community on PEI. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Brandon Sears. The honourable member's mic is not on.
Last November, Southwest Manitoba lost one of its stalwart individuals with the passing of Mr. Blair Woods. Blair was dedicated in helping his family and others. He loved farming, starting as a 4-H seed club member, participating in tractor pulls, operating long-haul trucking, and sharing his knowledge with countless trainees from around the world through the International Host Family Association. He was a charter member of the Elgin Lions Club. Blair served as president of Manitoba Snowman Inc. board and was second vice president of the Canadian Council of Snowmobile Organizations. Blair's major service, however, was local. As an RM of Whitewater Councillor from 1986 to 2002, Reeve from 2006 to 2014, and re-elected Reeve of the Amalgamated RM of Grassland in 2015. I want to thank his wife Ardell, his son Brooks, and his daughter Hillary, their partners and 6 grandchildren, for supporting Blair's tireless dedication and service to others. May you rest in peace, my dear friend.
The Honourable Member for Hochelaga. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. With COVID-19, health workers are part of our front line of defense against the pandemic. Hochelaga and the eastern part of Montreal have been sorely affected by the pandemic. Today, I would like to thank all of these health professionals for their hard work. Their mental and physical health has been greatly burdened by this crisis, but they are always there for us. For Valentine's Day, I wanted to send these health network employees in Hochelaga a little love. For example, those working at the Dante and Marie Relais long-term health centers, long-term care centers, and I sent them some Joanne Leroux chocolates. And I also raised the indispensable work of many other workers in Hochelaga, Maisonneuve, like hospital and medical clinic staff, dentists, optometrists, as well as corner store, pharmacy, and grocery store workers in my riding who are offering essential services. We need to continue to support and thank them, and we must continue to protect ourselves and follow public health measures, because ultimately we are thus protecting them. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
For Malpeque. The honourable member for Malpeque.
Madam Speaker, today I pay tribute to Mr. Daryl Ginion, who passed away recently. Daryl, perhaps PEI's most dedicated environmentalist, was one of the foremost spokesmen in his own quiet way for watershed conservation in PEI. His knowledge of our river systems was second to none. With 40 years teaching in the UPEI biology department, Daryl was famous for his field trips, visits to old-growth hardwoods and sand dune ecosystems, canoe trips to wetlands, and snowshoeing in nature. His efforts resulted in the implementation of the Morel River Conservation Zone, formation of the Island Nature Trust and protection of Greenwich, and numerous Atlantic salmon restoration projects. He receives awards aplenty, but I want to conclude by thanking Rosie, his partner in life and much of his work. It's said that pillow talk in their household was discussion around brook trout, salmon, and smelts. PEI has lost one of its best. Our condolences.
The honourable member for Markham Unionville.
I rise today to commemorate the 33rd anniversary of the massacre of an Armenian community in Samagat, Azerbaijan. In 1988, when Armenians in the Republic of HoC demanded their right to self-determination, Azerbaijani nationalists subjected the Armenian community living across Azerbaijan to bloody campaign of massacre and deportation. Over 200 Armenian men, women, and children lost their lives to state-sponsored campaign to hatred against Armenian, a policy that continues in Azerbaijan to this day. On September 27 last year, history once again repeated itself as the Azerbaijani unleashed a full-scale war against Armenian anarchists. Thousands of Armenians are still refugees, while Armenian POWs still remains under Azerbaijan custody. We must all learn from history and commit to standing up for justice and human rights all around the world, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Ottawa West Nepean.
Madam Speaker, 2 years ago, I stood in this House to call for an end to the arbitrary detention of Senator Leila de Lima of the Philippines, who was imprisoned in February 2017 for speaking out on human rights abuses, including leading a Senate inquiry into the extrajudicial killings in the Philippines' war on drugs. It is appalling that today she is still in prison. The UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention found that her imprisonment is contrary to international law. The European Parliament has called for her release, and Amnesty International has declared her a prisoner of conscience. Senator de Lima is in prison because she is a human rights defender. She has not only been deprived of her freedom, but also her right to fulfill her legislative mandate and participate in democratic debate. Madam Speaker, I ask all members of this House to join other parliamentarians around the world in calling for Senator de Lima's immediate release. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
For Sturgeon River Parkland.
The latest Liberal gun policies are a farce in a long line of epic Liberal failures. Within days of announcing yet another attack on farmers, duck hunters, and sport shooters, the Liberals have doubled down on their hug-a-thug agenda, repealing mandatory minimum sentences for violent criminals. Canadians are being killed by criminals in possession of illegal firearms, yet Liberals plan to waste hundreds of millions on a buyback scheme. Meanwhile, gangs continue to roam our streets unopposed. Given this threat to Canadians, Liberals should confront reality by getting tough on violent criminals and gun smugglers. Unfortunately, Liberals do what they always do and attack hunters, farmers, and duck shooters with new rules and regulations. It's time to stop attacking law-abiding firearm owners and fight gangs and violence.
The honourable member for Kenora.
Madam Speaker, temperatures in my riding and across Northern Ontario have been around -30 or even colder very recently. This is especially dangerous for the homeless population. It is no exaggeration to say that this can be a life or death situation. Volunteers with groups like Compassionate Kenora Moving Kenora Forward have set up warming centres to shelter the homeless from this extreme cold. And other organizations like the Kenora District Services Board, the Dryden Mission, and church communities across the riding continue to do great work providing housing, compassion, and opportunities for the most vulnerable. I know we are all very grateful for their selfless work during these cold winter days. I commend these local organizations who have been the lifeblood of their communities, and I like to encourage all Canadians to support their local charitable organizations in whatever way they can. I am proud to represent the people of the Kenora riding, Madam Speaker, who consistently step up to support one another and help those in need. It has not gone unnoticed.
The honourable member for Windsor West.
Yet again, I rise in this chamber to discuss single-event sports betting as the chamber voted overwhelming in favor of Bill C-218, which permits each province self-determination on how to regulate legal betting so revenues can flow, jobs created, and end billions of dollars feeding organized crime, bookies, and offshore operators. The bill was originally proposed by NDP MP Joe Martin, later myself, and I was pleased to repeal it to permit the member for Saskatoon Grasswood to join the efforts, and he has done good work. This decade-plus adventure has an exhilarating tale. Indeed, it passed before, it died in the Senate, But now some members, including the Prime Minister, have changed their vote. That is not a weakness, but a strength, speaking to the urgency required to fix the problem. Amongst the drama has been the recent Government Bill C-13, introduced with some doing victory laps, chest thumping, high fives, and slapping their own backs. Yet the government scuttled its own efforts, having never brought it to the floor for debate. Ironically, I defended the government as I think the Minister of Justice deserves credit for drafting good legislation. As we go forward, I want to thank the members who supported the bill, unanimously by the NDP Bloc, Green Party, and Liberals and Conservatives who did not. I remain open to helping work with this issue. I thank David Cassidy and Ken Luenza from Unifor 44, and our Mayor Dilkins and Francis and Rakesh Naidu and Martian for being on this journey. Thank you.
The
honourable member for Rivière-du-Nord. The honourable member for Rivière-du-Nord, your microphone, can you activate it? Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to recognize in this House an unusual hero, Madam Speaker. Donald Hargray did something remarkable during a severe storm which left more than 30 centimeters of snow on the cars of people working at Saint-Jérôme Hospital. On the 16th of January, a Saturday morning, he took up his shovel and took the snow off 150 cars, then 30 more later in the day, to let hospital staff finally be able to go home and rest. And despite that backbreaking work, he was back next morning at 6:30 to get the snow off 40 more cars. Madam Speaker, this is a 65-year-old hero armed with a squeegee, a snow scraper, and a shovel who waged war on the bleakness of winter and on this darn virus. He showed us that each of us can find our own way to make things a little better. He didn't do this to attract attention, but his remarkable actions do deserve some attention. Thank you very much, Mr. Hargray. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
L'honorable député de Saskatoon-Ouest.
Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister seems to be very smug these days, patting himself on the back for new vaccine deliveries. Without any sense of irony, he congratulates himself. Does he know that Canadians have been waiting for months to get vaccinated due to his government's failure to get vaccines delivered to Canada? Now, with the limited supply entering the country, the Prime Minister claims victory. Does he realize that most of our healthcare and frontline workers still aren't vaccinated? Neither are our seniors. In fact, we're now 54th in the world and dropping quickly. Yet, the Prime Minister beams with pride while Canada languishes with the worst unemployment rate in the G7. Does he realize there are still 850,000 people looking for work compared to a year ago? All this points to a Liberal government that has failed the ultimate test, failing to protect our citizens in an emergency. Madam Speaker, we need to get the vaccine rollout right in order to secure jobs and secure our economic future.
The honourable member for Saint-Laurent. Madam Speaker, February is Black History Month. It's an opportunity for all of us to celebrate and honour the heritage of Black Canadians and their communities. And it's a good time to think about the path that we have followed as a society. And also an opportunity to think of everything we can do to make things even better. Now, rather than concentrating on the failures of our society and what we haven't succeeded in, I'd like to concentrate on my vision of the world. A world I would like to help build. A world where each of us can feel safe. A country where we're all treated with the same level of respect and dignity.
I continue to help build a world where not only are we all considered equal in the eyes of the law, but where we are treated fairly in the application of the law, in the workforce, in the schoolyard, in our neighborhoods. And I invite all Canadians to help build this world. Teachers and parents, I urge you to talk about racism and discrimination to your kids. Instill in them the desire to fight racism and all forms of injustice. Teach them empathy and love, that what affects one of us affects us all, and that our fates as Canadians, whether we are Black or white, are all interconnected. Thank you.
Oral questions, questions orales. The honourable member for Carleton.
As the new UK variant starts to spread, Canadians were looking for some reassurance today from the Chief Public Health Officer, but this is what she said. For the next few months, we're not going to have a lot of people vaccinated. That's a fact. And she's right. We're now ranked 52nd. 51 countries in the world are vaccinating quicker than us. Many countries at 6, 7, and even 20 times the rate. What's the Prime Minister's plan now? Is he just going to lock us down forever?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I want to thank the member for the question. Madam Speaker, we're taking a multi-layered approach to keep Canadians safe, working, of course, as we've said many times in this House, working with the provinces and territories to protect our communities from outbreaks impact of new COVID-19 variants. And as part of that work, as a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, we've announced $53 million to create a variants of concern strategy, which will increase our monitoring and surveillance of new COVID-19 variants in Canada. Partnering with experts in research and public health, this will increase our ability to detect, track, and address outbreaks of COVID-19 variants in Canada. Thank you, Madam.
The honourable member for Carleton.
The purchase of vaccines is the most important procurement since our government bought arms in the Second World War. Thousands of lives and tens of thousands of jobs depend on it. When the Prime Minister thought, who should I buy them from? He looked around the world and he said, I know, the country that's holding our people hostage. You can imagine the PRC Politburo filled with bureaucrats rolling around on the ground in gut-splitting laughter at this Prime Minister's naivete. Madam Speaker, simple question. When he wasted 100 days in the PRC, what the hell was he thinking?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, thank you, Madam Speaker. We have distributed, of course, almost 1.6 million doses of vaccine to Canadians, and we've this week received the outstanding news that 14.5 million Canadians will have been vaccinated by the end of June, leading to, of course, every Canadian who wishes to receive a vaccine being vaccinated by the end of September. We have one of the most comprehensive vaccine supply portfolios in the world. And Madam Speaker, we will continue working with provinces and territories to
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Madam Speaker, vaccines are essential for economic recovery. As long as people aren't vaccinated, we can't talk about returning to normal. And if we don't do anything, Madam Speaker, we're going to hit the wall. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business said that 1 out of 10 runs the risk of closing this year if nothing changes. That represents 2.4 million people who might well lose their jobs. What is the government's plan to ensure that businesses survive and that workers keep their jobs?
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the question. We have taken action since day one to support our small and medium-sized businesses. As the member knows full well, more than 850,000 businesses have received support from the emergency account. We are currently helping pay Canadians across the country. We are here for small and medium-sized businesses, and we have been since the beginning, and we will continue to be there. We will be there until the end. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Madam Speaker, Canada is the G7 that has spent the most money, and it's the G7 country with the highest unemployment rate. So, Madam Speaker, if the government's plan worked, we wouldn't have such a high unemployment rate. So we have to admit that it's not working. And what's worse, Madam Speaker, for this government that says it's feminist, women are the one who are paying the price for it. They represent a 40% increase in unemployment. What's the plan to bring workers back? The Honourable Minister. Madam Speaker, I thank the Honourable Member for the question because it gives me an opportunity to share something tangible that we can all do to help small businesses and workers. And that is to adopt a Bill C-14. Allow me to quote Diane Kelly. Bill C-14 includes important measures for small and medium-sized businesses. I urge all parties to ensure that it's quickly adopted. Madam Speaker, this is something that we can all do to help workers and small businesses across the country. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Madam Speaker, I'd like to invite the Minister of Finance to go and look at the 213,000 Canadians who've lost their jobs last month alone. The person you were quoting said, well, it's going to go well, but that's not the reality. The minister wants to talk about C-14, but is the government ready then to accept our proposal to split the bill, to split Bill C-14, so that we can help small businesses and workers immediately? The Honourable Minister. Madam Speaker, my honourable colleague just quoted the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. I'd like to underscore that something tangible we can all do to help small businesses across the country, to help workers across the country, is to adopt Bill C-14. This isn't a time for partisan squabbling. It's a time to come together and to help Canadians. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Madam Speaker, the attempt to develop a vaccine in partnership with China and CanSino was a failure. On February 2nd, the Bloc Québécois asked the Minister of Health why the government had favored China over Canada and Canada's production capacity. She replied that the decision to focus on a vaccine candidate was based on advice from experts on the working group. Yesterday, however, that group confirmed, on the contrary, not going ahead with CanSino. Why did the government defy the experts' recommendation? And why is it hiding that fact? The Honourable Minister.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the member knows full well, and as Canadians know, we undertook negotiations with manufacturers, and we have the most diversified vaccine candidate portfolio. 14.7 Canadians will be able to be vaccinated by the end of June, and all Canadians can be vaccinated by the end of September. That's excellent news. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Madam Speaker, the government said it's following science and recommendations, but scientists have said publicly that that's not the case with CanSino, and that's a big problem for transparency. The government said it used science to deny $2 million for a very advanced Quebec vaccine project at Laval. It also relied on science to invest $54 million in CanSino, and this is false, as the scientists have said. Is he going to publish the expert recommendation, or do we have to just determine that it was a purely political decision to stop the Quebec vaccine? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, throughout the pandemic, we have relied on scientists, our experts on vaccines and immunology, and that's why we procured a very diversified vaccine portfolio. The Quebec candidate is one that we are happy to see.
Hanshaw.
2 weeks ago, I told this House about my constituent Robert Major, who applied for the CERB in good faith because he's unable to work due to health issues. Robert was asked by the CRA to repay that money. Last week, this government finally relented and recognized their mistake in clawing back CERB for self-employed Canadians. But they still refuse to recognize their mistake in forcing people like Robert to pay back the CERB. We are in the middle of the second wave. People are terrified for their futures. Why won't this government remove the entire unfair clawback?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the honourable colleague for the question. When the pandemic hit, we quickly introduced the CERB, helping more than 8 million Canadians put food on the table and keep a roof over their head. We know that this continues to be a difficult time for many, and we will continue to be there for Canadians who need help. And that is why we are allowing self-employed workers who applied for the CERB based on their gross income to keep their payments, as long as they met all other eligibility requirements. For people who may still need to make a repayment, no one is required to do so at this time. As the Prime Minister said, we will work with Canadians who need to make repayments in a way that is flexible and understanding of their circumstances. There won't be penalties or interest for anyone who erred in good faith. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Victoria.
Madam Speaker, Canadians are tired of waiting for this government, tired of watching them miss every single climate target they set. But when the Liberals finally introduced climate accountability legislation, not only was it full of gaps, putting off accountability for a decade, but now the government seems to be putting off debate on the bill indefinitely. We have said we are willing to work constructively to improve this bill to make sure there is accountability built in before 2030. But now it's been months and there is no sign of this urgent piece of climate legislation coming back to the House. Why is the Prime Minister once again putting off climate action?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for her question. We're proud to be the first government in history to put forward a bill that legislates carbon neutrality between now and 2050, Madam Speaker. We are diligently working not only with Canadians, but community groups as well as opposition parties, including the honourable member, to look at all possible ways that the bill can be improved upon. And we look forward to moving through that process in this House as well as the committee in order to deliver to Canadians the best possible piece of legislation we can. We know that we're doing it for our kids and our grandkids, and we want to get it right. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Calgary-Nose Hill.
Madam Speaker, this morning the government released new modeling with regard to the spread of variants in Canada, and the government has suggested that more lockdowns are needed. But there's something that could fix this problem, and it's a vaccine. The CBC's John Paul Tasker just tweeted that Dr. Theresa Tam said this morning, for the next few months, we're not going to have a lot of people vaccinated. That's a fact. So with today's modeling, are the Liberals admitting that their failure to vaccinate Canadians has made Canada vulnerable to variants and is going to create more lockdowns?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Canadians can be proud that we've secured one of the strongest vaccine portfolios in the world, more doses per capita than any other country. Health Canada regulators have been working around the clock to complete a thorough and independent review of vaccine candidates. And Madam Speaker, it's with a little bit of pride that I tell the House that we have now sent 1.56 million vaccines to provinces and territories. And we are on track to ensure that every Canadian who wants a vaccine can get one by September. Madam Speaker, we will continue to have the backs of Canadians.
The honourable member for Calgary-Nose Hill.
I think the member just said he is proud of the fact that modeling shows that our country is going to have an extreme spread of the variant, that we are going to have to be facing more lockdowns, and that the head of the Public Health Agency just said for the next few months, we're not going to have a lot of people vaccinated. That's a fact. A portfolio doesn't mean vaccines are here right now, and the government has left us in a tinderbox situation where these variants, the modeling that they're showing, might lead to more lockdowns, more lives lost, and more jobs lost. This is crazy. Will the government admit their failure and tell us what they're doing to fix this problem?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. As I said earlier, we're taking a multi-layered approach to keep Canadians safe. We're working, as we have from the start, with provinces and territories to protect our communities from outbreaks of these new COVID-19 variants. And as part of that work, Madam Speaker, we did announce $53 million to create a variants of concern strategy, which does increase our monitoring and surveillance of new COVID-19 variants in Canada. We will partner with experts in research and public health, and this will increase our ability to detect, track, and address outbreaks of COVID-19 variants in Canada.
L'honorable député de Chicoutimi.
The honourable member for Chicoutimi. Madam Speaker, today marks the beginning of an advertising campaign for dairy, poultry, and egg processors. Since 2015, these groups have been waiting for compensation from the government. Following the free trade agreement with Europe and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the Liberals have had 6 years to deliver the goods. They didn't do it despite their promises. The government must pay the promised compensation to our local processors. What are they waiting for?
Minister. L'honorable ministre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the honourable member for his question. Canada's supply-managed dairy and poultry and egg farmers play a critical role in keeping our rural communities vibrant. In order to offer dairy farmers more certainty, our government announced that the remaining $1.4 billion of compensation will be delivered over a timeline of 3 years. For Canada's 4,800 chicken, egg, broiler, and hatching egg and turkey farmers, our government also announced $691 million for a 10-year program. We'll always be there to defend supply management and will not make any further market access concessions. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honorable député de Chicoutimi.
The honourable member for Chicoutimi. Madam Speaker, in their shoes, I'd be embarrassed to repeat the same thing week in, week out. Wonder if they still believe in themselves, believe what they're saying. The Canada-US-Mexico Free Trade Agreement was signed last year. How long is it going to take for that compensation? When we know that they're still waiting for compensation under the other agreements. Our local processors are closing. Family businesses are being lost. What is the government waiting for to take some action?
Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the honourable member, or Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the honourable member for his question. We promised to fully and fairly compensate to supply managed sectors, and that is what we did. For dairy sector, to give an example, that represents $38,000 each year for the owner of a farm with 80 dairy cows. For chicken, egg, broiler, and hatching and egg turkey sectors, these programs will drive innovation and growth for farmers. We'll always be there to defend supply management and will not make any further market access concessions. Thank you.
The honourable member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Madam Speaker, earlier this week, the CRA suspended the 100,000 taxpayer accounts after learning that their login credentials were found on the dark web. Individuals were informed that in order to unlock their accounts, they'd have to contact the CRA. However, as many Canadians have found during this pandemic, it is very difficult to get a hold of the CRA. This is a challenging problem for many people as they are depending on their pandemic benefits as well as filing their tax returns through the CRA. What is the minister going to do to ensure that Canadians are not harmed by CRA's actions?
L'honorable ministre.
Madame, protection of Canadians' personal information is a priority for the CRA. Individuals signed up for My Account Alerts may receive a notification from the CRA indicating that their email address has been removed from their account. This step is taken proactively by the CRA as a security precaution. Let me be clear, there was no breach of CRA systems. Those affected by this measure can expect a letter by mail with instructions on how to unlock their account in the coming days. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
With respect, through you, Speaker, that's just not good enough. 100,000 Canadians have had their information put onto the dark web. And yes, it wasn't through the CRA, but through other. And however, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. The CRA has now been breached, or their subservients have been breached now twice within the last year. What will this minister do to keep Canadians' information safe?
The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Madam Speaker, as I stated a second ago, the CRA, their top priority is to protect the privacy and data of all Canadians and all information contained within the CRA systems. There has been no breach to the CRA data of any personal information by Canadians. We will continue to work with all Canadians so they can access again their accounts in a safe and a secure manner. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
L'honorable député de Abitibi.
The honourable member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you, Madam Speaker. On February 2nd, on the subject of vaccines, I asked at committee the Minister of Health why the government had favoured China over Canada's production capacity. She replied that the decision was based on the advice of experts on the task force. Yesterday, the secretary of the task force, Mr. Douglas, stated that he had recommended the opposite. So I'll ask my question again because it's very pertinent given that Canada is the only G7 country unable to produce vaccines against COVID-19. Why did the government favour China over Canada?
Minister.
The Honourable Minister. Madam Speaker, what Canada did was taking quick action based on the advice of scientists to put together the best portfolio of vaccine candidates in the world. Thanks to that strategy, by the end of June, we will be able to vaccinate 14.7 million Canadians and all Canadians by the end of September, which is excellent news, Madam Speaker. The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Well, I'm eager to see my 10 doses. In the UK, they adopted a different approach. They ramped up their production capacity. They brought together a consortium of researchers to develop a vaccine. They are producing locally, and they're producing vaccines massively. Canada, instead, turned to China, and it failed. Why did the government put all its eggs in a foreign supply basket? Why didn't it conduct a parallel effort here to produce a vaccine? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, allow me to reassure the member that since the start of this pandemic, we have pursued a very aggressive strategy. However, it's important that I point out to the member that that is not what the Secretary of the Vaccine Task Force said yesterday. And I quote, this is what was stated. I think that, Madam Chair, with great respect, CanSino was not at the heart of the Canadian strategy by any means. It was a much more balanced approach. I think we should continue to be guided by what was said by the Secretary. Thank you.
For Calgary, Midnapore.
Well, Madam Speaker, we saw it again in the Globe and Mail on Monday. This government is finally ready to release a plan for the airline sector, but we've been disappointed before. We saw the same story in Reuters in December. Negotiations only started in November. Why should tens of thousands of airline workers who've had no jobs for the past year believe the government this time?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I want to thank my colleague for inviting me yesterday to the Transport and Infrastructure Committee, where we spent quite a bit of time talking about the necessity and the importance of supporting our aviation sector. So I want to reassure her and all those Canadians who are watching. We are committed to supporting a resilient and strong airline sector. We are in the midst of negotiations with the airline sector, and we are hoping to move these negotiations as quickly as possible, Madam Speaker.
Member for Calgary-Midnapore.
Well, Madam Speaker, the minister is correct. He did appear yesterday in committee, and unfortunately, he got his facts wrong again about purchasing tickets to sun destinations. The minister said that it takes multiple tickets for an American carrier to take a Canadian to a sun destination, Madam Speaker, when in fact, it only takes a single ticket. So when will the minister get his facts straight? And also, Madam Speaker, when will the minister fix this problem?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I will argue that she needs to get her facts straight. I said multiple trips. Now, let me be very clear to all Canadians. We are asking all Canadians to suspend discretionary and vacation travel. In fact, as of next week, Madam Speaker, all Canadians who are returning to Canada from a non-essential trip will be asked first to conduct a test prior to boarding a flight. Then, once they arrive into one of the 4 major airports, and then they'll be asked to spend up to 3 days at a government...
For Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Well, Madam Speaker, for months, opposition parties have questioned the government about small businesses that have fallen through the cracks of their support programs, especially new businesses. And the government has said, don't worry, these businesses can apply for funding under the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund. But that fund's criteria leaves the same small businesses behind. How many loans have actually been made to struggling small businesses, or is this fund another program failing to meet its objectives?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member for his question. It is a timely question. In fact, at the moment, we are working, the Minister of Small Business with the Minister of Finance, in order to address this very issue. We have created numerous programs. We also ensured that the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund would be there for businesses that otherwise fell through the cracks. Obviously, new businesses created during the pandemic are in a particular situation. Some of them are doing very well, having been created in order to respond to the pandemic, and some of them really need our help. We are working on criteria in order to make sure that the money spent by this government, taxpayer dollars, is being spent appropriately, and that we are...
L'honorable député de Beauce.
The honourable member for Beauce. Madam Speaker, do you think it's normal for Canadians to have to wait weeks, if even months, for a reply from the CRA? Tax season has arrived and many Canadians are anxious. More than 400,000 letters have been sent out to Canadians. And the CRA has only recently hired 2,000 new employees for the call centres. As usual, the Prime Minister was late taking action. When will these employees be fully trained and operational? And does the Prime Minister think that that's enough to deal with the significant increase in calls coming into the centres? The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The CRA is up for the job this year. We know this tax season is going to be like no other for Canadians, especially the 9 million Canadians that accepted the CERB and applied for it due to being impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. We have hired and are in the process of hiring 2,000 more call center agents. Madam Speaker, we've received over 1 million calls to the CRA in a given week versus 70 to 80,000 in the year prior. We know that Canadians need the assistance, and we will be there to help them. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
Madam Speaker, many women have contacted my office complaining that the CRA and Service Canada penalize them when they flee abusive partners. One woman fled a 30-year relationship and got a peace bond against her spouse, only to be told she would have to wait 90 days before her benefits would be changed to single. Now, if her partner went to jail, the change would be automatic. Madam Speaker, financial hardship is one of the main reasons women remain in abusive relationships. When will this government reduce this barrier by removing this pointless 90-day waiting period?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, my colleagues brings to this House a really important point. Nothing keeps women trapped like poverty. I appreciate his advocacy and we will follow up.
The Honourable Member for Skeena, Bulkley Valley.
Madam Speaker, Air Canada says no passenger refunds without a bailout. The government says no bailout without refunds. We're a year into this pandemic, and somehow this government has allowed billions of dollars of air passengers' own money to become a bargaining chip in negotiations. The US, the UK, and the EU all found ways to mandate refunds. Why are other countries so much better at protecting passenger rights than this government is?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, once again, I want to thank my colleague for his question. And this is an issue that we also talked about yesterday at committee. I want to assure him that as we are right now in the midst of discussions with the major airlines, that the issue of refunds for Canadians who had to cancel their trips for no fault of their own is on the table. So I can assure him and all Canadians that this is an important aspect of our discussion, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Brome-Missisquoi. Madam Speaker, I'd like to refer to a recent quote from Jan Reimer, former mayor and now executive director of a provincial council of women's shelters. The proposed legislation is a step in the right direction, she says. Women are being threatened with guns. It's one of the leading, if not the leading, cause of death for women in abusive relationships. Better control doesn't take anybody's rights away, but it does protect women's rights to safety. People in my home province of Quebec have witnessed traumatic acts of violence against women committed by a criminal with an assault-style firearms. The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable colleague from Brome-Missisquoi for this important question and her tireless advocacy. We are removing all military-style assault rifles from the market by preventing them from being used or bequeathed and by offering fair market value on buyback. Strengthening our ban this week on firearms with Bill C-21, and we also introduced a flag system which will make it possible to remove weapons from people who pose a danger to themselves or to their loved ones. And the purpose is to combat domestic violence and violence against women. It's been applauded by the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police.
Nicola.
Madam Speaker, a small business right here in Ottawa is being told by Parks Canada they aren't eligible for the 75% rent support because their 6-month lease is considered an annual lease. Now, as the minister is no doubt aware, 6 months and a year are two very different things. This government loves to pat themselves on the back, but then they actually ignore helping the people that need it. Why is Parks Canada taking the absurd step of counting a 6-month lease as an annual one?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I am so glad that the honourable member shares my concern for helping Canadian small businesses. While we continue to fight COVID, they do desperately need our support. And that's why I would like to ask the honourable member and all of his Conservative colleagues to join us in getting Bill C-14 passed. In fact, Dan Kelly, the head of the CFIB, has called on all of us to get this done. He said CFIB urges all parties to ensure this support.
The honourable member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Madam Speaker, numerous veterans in my riding have come to me expressing extensive delays with Veterans Affairs. One veteran's disability benefit application went in 4 years ago, and it still has not been processed. Another veterans application has been undergoing a department review, and this has now been since 2019. This is unreasonable and unacceptable delays. Why is the minister leaving veterans waiting up to 4 years to process disability benefits?
The Honourable Minister. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to answer the question to my colleague. Our recent investment, of course, of nearly $200 million will allow us to hire hundreds of new staff and speed up the process in ensuring that veterans receive faster decisions. Veterans should receive the benefits and services they're entitled to in a timely manner, and as I've said, the backlog is unacceptable. This is my number one priority, and we're going to do everything we can to ensure that we tackle this backlog and clean up this backlog. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Madam Speaker, this government has smashed records when it comes to deficits and debt. But when it comes to jobs, this government gets an F. Canada lost nearly 300,000 jobs in December and January. We have the highest unemployment rate in the G7, 50% above the G7 average. So, for all of the spending and all of the debt, where are the jobs?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, Canada has in fact recovered 71% of the jobs lost in the wake of the pandemic, and that is compared to just 56% recovered in the United States. And at 64.3%, Canada today has a higher labor force participation rate than Germany, the US, Japan, and South Korea. In January, in the midst of lockdowns, total hours worked in Canada actually increased. Canadians are resilient, and they are doing their job in getting Canada back to work.
The Honourable Member for Mission Matsky Fraser Canyon.
Madam Speaker, the Liberals' newest housing program gave $500 million to big cities, but left the little guys to compete for the rest. They say this initial allocation went to cities with severe housing needs, which I don't doubt, and that it was data-driven, which I do doubt. Why? We learned in the HuMA Committee that CMHC literally has no way of measuring homelessness in rural and remote communities. Why has this government turned its back on rural Canada and ignored their housing needs?
Honourable Minister.
Madam President, the opposite is in fact true. The Rapid Housing Initiative is a remarkable billion-dollar investment directly into the communities that need support to support vulnerable Canadians as they look for housing in this COVID pandemic, as well as through the housing crisis. But I'll remind the Conservative member opposite that the policy their party put in place required federal dollars not to be spent on homeless people unless they've been on the street for 6 months. 6 months before they could receive a penny of support through Reaching Home in rural, urban, and northern communities. That would put a teenager on the street for 6 months in the middle of winter without any support. I will take no lessons on fighting homelessness from the Conservatives. They had no fight.
The Honourable Member for La Pointe de l'Île. Madam Speaker, the entire province of Quebec is calling on this Liberal government to bring federally regulated businesses under Bill 101. But that's not what the government's announcing today. Will the federal government, what they want to do is bring companies under their Official Languages Act, not Bill 101. In other words, they want to extend the Air Canada model to other businesses. They're using Air Canada, top prize winner for most complaints about disrespect for French, as the example to follow. Why doesn't the government bring these companies under Bill 101? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. As a matter of fact, all Quebecers are entitled to work and be served in French, and that's precisely what we're proposing, Madam Speaker. We need to each keep to our own jurisdiction. We're acting within ours. The federal government has a role to play in protecting minority language communities, and that will be done with full cooperation with the provinces and territories. The Honourable Member for La Pointe de l'Île. Madam Speaker, they're not respecting their jurisdiction. The federal government is encroaching on Quebec jurisdiction. Bill 101 should apply to federally regulated businesses. That's what Quebec's asking for. Quebec wants these companies covered by Quebec law on Quebec territory. What the Liberals are proposing is to make them accountable to the Commissioner of Official Languages, who can't even rap non-compliant parties over the knuckles. When will the government meet Quebec's demand and bring federally regulated companies under Bill 101? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wonder why this tone from my colleague, because if there's one thing we do share, it's our love for French. And with pride today, we have introduced an ambitious reform that will move things forward with positive steps. And that's a big part of our game plan to better protect French in Canada and to strengthen French and increase the bilingualism rates in Canada. The Honourable Member for Cypress Hills.
Grasslands?
Madam Speaker, there's one thing Canadians can count on. When dealing with an embarrassing scandal such as their failed vaccine procurement, the Liberals will use law-abiding gun owners as their punching bag to create a distraction. They wasted billions on their failed gun registry. Now they are focused on buying back something the government never owned in the first place: firearms from people who are following the law. When will the government stop harassing farmers, small business owners, and law-abiding gun owners and instead focus on real criminals?
Honourable Minister.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to reassure all hunters, farmers, and sports shooters that they are not targeted in any way. They have our full respect. On the contrary, this bill, the purpose of it is to deal with criminals who traffic in illegal weapons. The Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police has unreservedly supported all efforts to increase control at the borders and to control guns. And that's what we're doing with C-21, in addition to many other steps that we will take to improve Canadian safety.
Madam Speaker, can you hear me? Madam Speaker, there was a bill that would have tackled gun violence in the GTA. It was my bill, C-238, that the Liberals shamefully voted against. After 5 years of sitting on their hands, the Liberals have introduced a gun bill that won't make the GTA any safer. Madam Speaker, how is the Minister not ashamed of Bill C-21?
The Honourable Minister.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. C-21 is an important step in better controlling guns in Canada. This is a commitment we made during the election campaign. We want to give municipalities more powers to control handguns. And this is something that was applauded not only by the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, but also by the doctors who've described our bill as very complete and it will save lives. The Honourable Member for Bow River.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last week, the Liberals did everything in their power to avoid releasing the details of the vaccine contracts they signed. The Liberals filibustered the Conservative motion at Health Committee. They then wanted to shut down the committee. Other countries have made vaccine contracts public. The premiers and federal ministers disagree about the contents of the contracts. What were in those contracts? What are the Liberals hiding from the Canadian taxpayers?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, of course, we have shown notable transparency, and of course, we communicate doses, information to provinces and territories, and we coordinate our vaccination effort very well. But let me quote Innovative Medicines Canada, which represents, of course, a number of our vaccine suppliers. It says, "We urge all parties to respect the confidential nature of these commercial contracts, which were entered into in good faith, and ensure that commercially sensitive and proprietary information is protected from disclosure at this critical time."
Honorable Député de Bourassa.
The Honourable Member for Bourassa. Madam Speaker, It's a fact. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated the inequalities that already existed across the country. It has had a devastating effect on racialized and marginalized groups that were already among the most vulnerable. For example, think of all the problems with addiction that continue to claim many lives across Canada. Yesterday, the Minister of Justice introduced important changes to the criminal justice system. Could the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice and the Attorney General of Canada update the House on these changes? Thank you. The Honourable Minister. I'd like to thank the member for Bourassa for his dedication to the most vulnerable Canadians and the fight against racism. We have listened to Canadians, including experts and members of this House, who are asking us to take action for a more efficient and fairer justice system. As a result, we've introduced several measures to combat discrimination and racism in the justice system. In particular, we will provide alternatives to police and prosecutors to treat drug problems and health as a health problem rather than a crime. It's time to turn the page on failed Conservative policies and move towards a fairer justice system. Thank you.
The honourable member for Souris Moose Mountain.
Madam Speaker, recently at the Public Accounts Committee, the Assistant Deputy Minister for Finance struggled to respond when asked if Canadians are charged GST on the carbon tax, eventually stating that no, they are not. This is both false and misleading, as one of my constituents, who owns a small transportation company, has already paid over $2,500 in GST on the carbon tax since April 2019. Why is there such a discrepancy between what top finance officials are saying and what small business owners are actually experiencing?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I would like to thank the honourable member for the question, and I would like to say that our government is absolutely committed to supporting small businesses, and I would love to see members of the Conservative Party join us in that commitment. We disagree about a lot, but if we all believe we need to support small businesses, let's get behind Bill C-14. Dan Kelly was out there yesterday urging us all to pass this law. It will deliver concrete support. Let's do that.
The honourable member for Edmonton-Wetaskiwin.
Madam Speaker, I've asked this exact same very simple yes or no question twice before in November and December and gotten incoherent non-responses from the government. So I'm going to try again. We're importing tens of millions of barrels of oil per year into Canada from Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, and Algeria. Yes or no? Is this oil subject to the same rigorous regulations on upstream and downstream emissions as oil coming from Alberta, Saskatchewan, and the minister's very own home province of Newfoundland? Yes or no?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, let me speak to impending projects in this country. I mean, there are 32 oil sands projects in Alberta that are approved and ready to go. They're just waiting for the provincial government's approval or investment from the private sector, but they're ready to go. And this is in addition to our support for TMX, NGTL, Line 3. We approved them. We're building them. In the case of TMX, we bought it. We're creating thousands of jobs for oil and gas workers because we are proud of them, and we're proud of this industry as it continues to lower emissions. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Calgary Skyview.
Madam Speaker, over the last 6 years, Alberta's economy has been devastated by the policies of this Liberal government. The COVID-19 pandemic has only served to exacerbate these issues. For years, we have heard this government say that the best interest of Canadians is their priority. So my question, Madam Speaker, is when will this government stop offering words to Albertans and start taking concrete action to protect our jobs?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I will reiterate once again to this House. TMX, we approved it. We're building it. 7,000 jobs so far. Line 3 pipeline, we approved it. Another 7,000 jobs created. NGTL 2021, we approved it. Thousands of jobs created. LNG Canada, we're building it. Thousands of jobs. Orphan and inactive wells, $1.7 billion. Thousands of jobs created. And the wage subsidy with more than 500,000 workers kept in their jobs in a pandemic in Alberta alone. That is our record, Madam Speaker. We're proud of it. Thank you.
Member for Davenport.
Madam Speaker, the pandemic has dramatically impacted many small businesses, and our federal government support through programs like the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy and the Canada Rent Subsidy have been lifelines for our businesses and very much appreciated. However, some new legitimate businesses opened after March 2020, many who signed leases and contracts in the months prior to the pandemic, and they cannot qualify for these benefits. Isabel and Century Park Tavern are just two examples in my writing. Can the minister update this House on what our federal government is doing to support new businesses?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for her question. Obviously, she knows that there is nothing more important to us than helping our small businesses and Canadian employees right across the country. But there's also no one-size-fits-all solution for this relief. We created a very wide range of supports and programs to help small businesses, including the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund, which is there and designed really to help support businesses that don't qualify for other programs. That being said, colleagues in government, along with myself and the Parliamentary Secretary to Finance, had a very productive meeting last week looking at solutions, particularly for new businesses. I encourage the member.
The Honourable Member for Vancouver East.
My constituent has been earning $5,000 to $7,000 each year as a busker. He diligently declared his self-employment income on his income tax for the last 2 years. The pandemic has seen his income reduced drastically. In applying for the CRB, he has been told by CRA that his income tax return is not good enough. CRA wants to see receipts or bank deposits for the $20 to $25 he earned in loose change as a busker each day. This is just absurd. Is the government treating shareholders of big corporations the same way, or is this just for low-income residents? Will the minister take immediate action to correct this unjust treatment?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Our government has been clear from the beginning of the pandemic that we will always be there to support Canadians. The Canada Emergency Response Benefit eligibility criteria clearly stated that a person had to earn at least $5,000 in 2019 or over the last 12 months from employment income, self-employment income, or provincial benefit payments related to maternity or paternity leave. CERB eligibility was not dependent on having filed a tax return, but the CRA encourages everyone to file their 2019 tax return so the agency can confirm their eligibility. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honourable Member for Fredericton.
Exactly 1 year ago today, an emergency debate took place in this House addressing the Wet'suwet'en fight for their inherent right of self-government on their ancestral territory. Time has passed, but nothing has changed. Land guardians in Nunavut are now forced to defend their rights and their territory in the face of the Mary River mine expansion. Once again, Indigenous voices are trampled on, ignored, or distorted. The Minister of Infrastructure recently said that government investments are almost binary. You either increase emissions or you reduce them. Madam Speaker, if it is a binary, on which side is this government? Fight the climate crisis or pretend to do so? Respect Indigenous rights and international covenants like UNDRIP or legislate them out of existence?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, in 1997, the Supreme Court of Canada encouraged parties in Delmaguk to pursue good faith negotiations regarding Aboriginal rights. This MOU establishes a path for substantive negotiations towards agreements that would describe the implementation of the Wet'suwet'en rights and title. The parties are working toward an agreement on recognition of rights and the title that will set the stage for future negotiations and implementation. Such agreements, once reached, will be taken back to all Wet'suwet'en people through a ratification process that must clearly demonstrate their support. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
That's all the time we have for oral questions.
For Calgary Midnapore has a point of order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. During question period, the Minister for Transport implied that my facts were incorrect regarding being able to purchase a single ticket to a sun destination. Madam Speaker, I was just on Expedia and I had the ability to purchase a...
And not a point of order. I would just say that that is a point of debate. I would ask the member to please take her chair. Other point of order, the Honourable Minister.
Is it Parliamentary Secretary?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I believe this is a proper point of order, and especially with the usage of inappropriate and unparliamentary language. I believe in one of the opening questions, the member from Carleton referred to the opposite of heaven in terms of raising a question, trying to emphasize the point. I don't think the usage of the term hell is parliamentary language, and I would ask him to retract it and for you to encourage parliamentary language. Thank you.
I appreciate the information that the point of order that has been brought forward. I will look at the Hansard to see what was exactly said. I would just remind members at this point, and I'll come back to the House if needed. I just would remind members to please be mindful of the language that they use to ensure that it is acceptable language within the House of Commons. Routine proceedings. Tabling of documents. L'honorable ministre.
The Honourable Minister. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I have the honour to table the Government of Canada's public reform document for the modernization of the Official Languages Act, French and English towards substantive equality of the official languages in Canada. I believe that, Madam Speaker, you will be pleased to see this document.
Très bien. Tabling of documents. Introduction of government bills. L'honorable ministre.
The Honourable Minister. Oh, but that's not under this heading.
Statements by ministers.